Welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar on virtual working at its best. My name's Joe Nagel and this is Mark O'Keefe, the founder of the Innovation Beehive.
Morning everyone.
Today's webinar is brought to you by the Marches Growth Hub in Shropshire. So we're really delighted to be working in partnership with the Marches Growth Hub to support SMEs both in the Marches region but also across the UK. So welcome from wherever you are. Delighted to have you on with us today. And just to say, the Marches Growth Hub offers support to businesses from pre-start, early stage through to growth businesses. Free one-to-one business advice sessions are available, and Emma and Anna are on the call with us today. And I'll make sure that you get their contact details and how to reach out to the Growth Hub in the follow-up email afterwards. So do reach out to them if you're based in the Marches Growth Hub zone, and reach out to get your business advice and support from them. And actually, if you're based in another part of the UK, go online and see if there's a growth hub in your area, and be sure to see what support is available to businesses in your area in these challenging times. So I'm delighted that we're here talking about virtual working at its best today. I'm sure, like us, you have been practicing some form of virtual working for many weeks since we went into lockdown and potentially before. So I'd love to know, before we dive into our content, and I will warn you now, there's going to be a lot of participation on this webinar. I would love to know, for starters, why you're here today. And I've got a few options coming up on the poll. So if you can see that, do select the ones that apply most to you. And also find the chat box and feel free to write other reasons that you're here today as well. And we'll have a quick look at what people say. So I can see some responses coming in. That's great to see. And it's multiple choice, so select all the ones that apply to you.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't just have to select
You don't
one.
just have one reason.
Okay, now, I think that's the thing, actually. Often on these things, you're forced into saying, well, this is the one reason I'm here. And you might have many different reasons to come today. And we want to hear all of them today.
Yeah. I can see quite a few of you already had a go at the poll, but we'll give it a few more seconds. I should say as well, one of the first tips that I always try and say when I'm on webinars is around virtual working is the one thing that we can control is sticking to time. So we are always determined to start at the time we say we're going to start. So I can see someone else, as well as the options on the poll, someone else has written in the chat box, curiosity. So that's good. I'm glad.
Alice.
I hope, like Alice.
Alice in Wonderland, curious and curious. Well, curiosity is an essential skill in the innovators toolkit, actually, being curious about the world, being curious to solve problems. So hopefully you're in the right place, Andrea. So good to see you're curious today. Hopefully we'll have satisfied some of your curiosity by the end of the call.
And I can see just about everybody has responded to the poll. So I'm going to end that now and share the results. And we've got a fairly mixed bag of reasons why people are here. Glad to see that people are interested in learning more about the tools, because we're going to be talking about those at some length today, so that's good. Wanting to understand how to lead people remotely. Well, actually, Mock has just been writing a white paper, which is going to be published this week, in fact, which is all about leading people gently and slowly out of lockdown and into return. Lots of virtual working. I want to make sure I'm doing the best I can. Yeah, there's definitely a piece around optimization of the way we work, and I think that's something that we ought to be practicing in our day-to-day work, regardless of the situation we're in. So delighted that that's something that I'm hoping people are going to get from today. And embedding learning from virtual working in lockdown into my organization. Again, you talk about that a lot.
There's such a huge opportunity. Our digital capability in most organizations or as individuals has just been raised exponentially. And I think it would be a real shame if we missed this.
Absolutely, and actually, Mark, I think that leads on to the next couple of slides. So right. I'm going to move us on.
Okay, so as the slide says there, we're all either in lockdown or coming out of lockdown, but the world has had a shock over the last couple of weeks and has continued to have shocks as new information emerges hourly, daily. I certainly feel for the first couple of weeks we were glued to 10 Downing Street's press announcements every day, perhaps a little bit less now. Also the news cycles that were coming through, new drama, new information, new data being released. What a lot of leaders felt also is that they were unusually finding out information at exactly the same time, or even sometimes slightly behind when their employees and their team members are finding out information. So lots of shocks and lots of ricochets coming in continuously, and they will continue. But during that time, and up actually the 18 months before we went into this pandemic, we were conducting some research to help understand how leaders historically have led through times of massive disruption. Now, initially we were talking about disruption with a capital D in terms of innovation disruption, so disrupting markets through things like AI or new business models. But the more and more we looked at what our leaders were telling us when we had interviewed them over 18 months, it also relates to disruption with a small d, the disrupted times that we're living through at the moment. So we looked and talked to leaders 18 months in advance of what happened when we all went into lockdown, and also took the opportunity to review how leaders led through things like the last financial crash, and looked at how people led and worked through the last flu pandemic in 1918. And we were able to actually discover that there were 4 stages that we believe that we will be going through as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've already been through stage 1, which is stabilize. And in this, we'll be going into these in a little bit more detail. And as Joe said, I've just written a white paper in detail on return, which you'll have access to as well.
And also just to say that next week, and the details of this will be on the final slide, but next week we're going to be doing another webinar focused exactly on what Mark is talking about right now. So he'll be going into a lot more depth on this next week.
Thank you. So the first stage of the roadmap through uncertainty was about stabilizing the ship. It was about really understanding what is happening and how do I continue to operate in some shape or form during this period. And there were different skills and behaviors that you can see on the screen that were required there. Then we moved into the second stage, which we're in now, which is sustain. And this is where you needed to have a real marathon mindset. It wasn't all just about doing a sprint in the first couple of weeks and saying, this is only going to last 2 or 3 weeks. It's ongoing. And for many of us, it will be ongoing for a number of months still. So this was about how do I carry on working through this? What new problems am I coming up against? More and more, we're finding that our clients and the wider community are having to delve into the tool of the innovator's toolkit and pull out agility, creative problem solving, adaptability, idea generation tools to try and solve all the new challenges that are coming on a daily or a weekly basis. And also organizations, whilst we're suffering economic, and every one of us may have suffered as a business an economic hit, you can't stay frozen there. There will be businesses that will identify opportunities throughout this time. And it's my firm belief that in 2021, we will have a whole new range of startup organizations who've spotted opportunities and actually been established and managed to grow through COVID-19. Our own business was established in the absolute depths of the last financial crash when nobody was hiring management consultants. We went out there and started the Innovation Beehive. And 11 years later, we're still going, I'm glad to say. The third stage, which was starting to plan for now and will move into at different levels in the economy, depending what industry you work in, is the return phase. At the heart of this has to be what the customer requires, the new expectations and requirements of the customer, and then how do you build an organization that has the skills and the capability to deliver upon this? What does it look like structurally? Before then moving your face towards, away from what's happened, towards the future, to establish new goals and new objectives and create a new sense of meaning within the team. So 4 stages: stabilize the ship, sustain the business, return to work, renew and grow.
And as we said, there's going to be a white paper published this week. Angela, that white paper will be available on our website. Angela has asked where it's going to be available. It'll be available on our website from Thursday this week. So look out for it on innovationbeehive.co.uk.
So whilst we've all no doubt experienced terrible emotional highs, emotional lows, those people who operate businesses on here will no doubt have had huge impact on their businesses. We as an organization, as the Innovation Beehive, have some staff on furlough. We've had some economic hits. However, there are some opportunities that will come out of this as well, both for those organizations that spot the opportunity in the immediacy, for those entrepreneurs that spot the opportunity and create a startup. But there's a broader opportunity in terms of how we operate our business. So, average business travel costs of £750 per employee per year. This was a management consultancy in the last year, not our business, but the average business travel costs and the average cost that a commuter spends getting to work over the last year, £1,750.
And of course, if you're based in London, it's significantly higher.
Absolutely. Or maybe if you're based, out there like us, outside of London, and paying £2,000 or £3,000 a year on season tickets to go into London as well. So there is absolutely potential savings to be made, as we've all learned that you can work from home. You can be effective remotely. You don't have to be in the office to have effective meetings with people. Yes, there are new ways of working. Yes, there are new ways of behaving with each other. However, those travel costs and that commuter spend, I believe, can significantly be reduced. And we've all seen pictures of the Venetian canals, or maybe just looked up and seen how blue the sky is, or heard more bird song than we have done in the last couple of years. To see actually the impact on the environment is massive. Now, lots of organizations, including our own, were looking at our carbon footprint and trying to monitor and reduce it within the world. Now, here, a major professional services firm reduced its carbon footprint by over 40% since the last global crash. However, their business travel remains almost stagnant. Now, that will presumably, when that data is released again from that organization, fall off the cliff in terms of business travel. Yet, I'm sure they still managed to keep their clients close. They've still managed to operate to some extent. And hopefully they'll all, like other organizations, start to challenge themselves to say, do we need to travel? Do we need to physically be at this meeting? Because as Joe is about to say, it's time to get serious about virtual collaboration.
Absolutely. So there you go. It's time to get serious about virtual collaboration. And actually, just to loop back to what Mark was saying about that professional services firm, they've identified this as the major blind spot that they had when they were working on their carbon emissions strategy for the last 10 years. They just didn't even think about it as a factor. They didn't think about it as something that they needed to factor into their thinking. So as well as people thinking about virtual working now, I think it's great that we've got so many people on this webinar today, because you're going to be thinking about virtual working into the future. And I was really pleased to see so many people talking about what you can learn from the experience of the lockdown that you can take back into your ways of working going forward, because we do have a huge, fantastic opportunity to change our world for the better through this. So what are we going to cover today on this webinar? We're going to look at, you'll be pleased to know, the majority of you, the tools of virtual working. We're also going to look at some of the challenges of virtual working that we're going to be encountering. And I'm hoping that I'm going to hear from you all on some of the challenges that you've faced over the last few weeks and that you can imagine facing in the future. We're then going to talk about how we can set up for success. And Mark, again, is going to come back to the roadmap to talk about how we can learn from what we've experienced and how we can build robust cultures and systems and structures to go forward into a brighter, less, a more virtual, collaborative future. And then we'll talk about some next steps for you all. So first off, I'd love to hear from you on the chat box. What are some of the big challenges that you see in virtual working? And I asked this question a few weeks ago before we'd really, on a similar webinar, before we'd really dived into the lockdown, and people were sort of gearing up for it. And it'll be really interesting to see what the challenges are now that you've experienced virtual working for a number of weeks. So Anna's come in and said technology not working. Absolutely.
Anyone who's not based in a major conurbation has probably experienced some sort of outage or problem with their internet or speed. I was on a global call with a CEO a couple of weeks ago. In mid-flow about to offer advice, I disappeared. And I think that impacts your credibility.
Yeah, definitely. Internet speed, another challenge. Yeah. And actually, we're based in rural Gloucestershire, and we've struggled with internet, and we've just invested in a new line precisely because, you have to invest as well as, rather than just sort of sitting back and taking the challenge, we did something about it. Zach said keeping a sense of community. That's great. Talking about the cultural aspects of virtual working as well, and the challenges of keeping together and staying connected. Colleagues having no skills and in some cases apprehensive. Do you know, Norma, that's really interesting. So as a sort of extracurricular activity, I've been supporting my local church to run virtual church services on Sundays. And you know, I was expecting to have around 8 or 9 people join, and probably mainly people below the age of 70. And we've had over 100 people joining consistently. And when people really want it, they can find a way to make it happen. So part of the role of leaders of businesses is to inspire people to really want to use the digital technology.
And you've had to deliver training and coach people through, and I've seen you and heard you talking to many an octogenarian saying, can you see the button there with click? And they're getting it.
They are, yeah. And often you find that they've got one window in front of another, and that just causes so many problems. So different areas of the business using very different means to communicate, chefs and waiters versus head office. Yeah, that's a really good point. Mark, you've been working with a number of retail and hospitality organizations over the last few years, and that is a challenge.
It is absolutely a challenge, and what we're finding more and more particularly is a lot of head offices have gone over to things like Teams and Zooms, but if they have a more dispersed, maybe an hourly paid workforce as well, they haven't got access to those things. So what we're advising businesses is to find one clear channel that everyone can hook into. You might have portals that are for particular populations of your employees, but actually having one key place that everyone goes to, make sure you get consistent messages. There is a feeling of a shared experience as you do that. There obviously are some costs and implications of that as well, but our advice has been one shared place, but many portals.
But also, there are so many ways that people communicate with each other. So those chefs and waiters probably have one of these in their pocket. And these have, for example, WhatsApp, which is a secure encrypted system. A lot of our clients are actually using WhatsApp to communicate with people. Now, sometimes we find that people's digital and security protocols get in the way of things like that. But actually, you know, bring your IT director on side to kind of find a way around them, perhaps, because, or to find a way to make it work, because other organizations are making it work.
And that's actually to Andrew's point about too many channels being used. It can sometimes feel, I mean, yesterday I was on Teams meetings, Google's Hangouts, and Zoom calls, and talking to somebody on WhatsApp. And I was getting a little bit frustrated around the number of different tools that I was being asked to use. But I also was thinking in terms of people's mental well-being, in terms of understanding and meeting people in the place where they currently are and making it as easy as possible for them to carry on working. I sort of put my own personal frustrations aside and said, right, I'm going to use the tool that works best for them, rather than shooting back and saying, no, we prefer to use Zoom, or actually Teams is what we're doing now. Just making sure that I got onto that Google Hangout when I was required to, and I got onto that WhatsApp call when I was required to, and trying to put myself in their shoes as much as possible as well.
And I can see Norma has said challenges reaching a large audience about a particular product. So interestingly, I think what I'm hoping you'll take from this webinar is that there are lots of opportunities to have wider reach and also more consistent reach. So the Innovation Beehive, when we used to try to reach out to new clients, we would hold 4 events a year, and we'd have between 30 and 50 people at each event. So that adds up to 200 people a year. Now, since lockdown started, we have reached over 500 people via webinars and via virtual WhatsApp groups and things like that, because we've been able to invest time rather than money in getting our message out to people. So actually, there are opportunities there. If you get the right technology and the right product, and you put it out in the right way, you can reach many, many more people. We've had loads of comments.
Wow, fantastic. should we save the comments and put them in actually as part of the communications afterwards?
What we'll do is we'll pull these together as a sort of almost like a word cloud, or I'll find a nice way of putting them together, and I'll share these with you, because there are some fantastic points here that I think it's really worth sort of reflecting on. But I think we should probably start thinking about the tools of virtual working.
Virtual tools of working. So actually, I talked a little bit earlier, right at the top of the webinar, about the 4 stages that we'll go through, the roadmap through uncertainty. And we've all really moved out of the stabilize phase, the first stage there, which is like, my goodness, how do I keep the wheels on this vehicle? How do I keep the car facing forward? But at that point, we suddenly all had to come up with, how do I work from home and communicate with people? And I know, for example, we spent a number of sort of months looking at Microsoft 365, Outlook, looking at whether or not we should use Teams. And actually, we were all thrown into a situation where we immediately had to adapt and use virtual tools of working just to stabilize the business and to have those first virtual coffee mornings, or those first virtual team check-ins in the morning and the afternoon that we were all being advised about. And as you move through, Joe's going to explain a little bit more about some of the tools that we've all got so used to using.
Yeah, now as I mentioned earlier, I delivered a webinar similar to this when I talked about a number of the tools that we could use right just before lockdown happened. And this slide was, there were a number of people who hadn't used any of these tools. Now I think given that we're all on a webinar, we can all say we've used webinars, but I would suspect that just about everybody on this webinar today is used to using virtual meetings. And I imagine most of us are using one form of instant messenger or another, whether that is working with, communicating with our family or spending time communicating with our colleagues. I imagine we're all fairly familiar with these. There is a lot of best practice you can use when it comes to virtual meetings and webinars. For example, being on time and starting on time. And I saw one of the comments, one of the challenges was things like dogs interrupting and children interrupting. And I think increasingly what we're all realizing is that's part of the fun of it.
And actually on the back of that, we are all seeing each other's homes. We're seeing our lives a bit more. We're hearing our dogs. We're seeing our children coming in. It's no longer on the news when a correspondent's child suddenly appears in the background, which was world news about a year ago. Because of that, I think actually traditional hierarchies are being broken down. We're seeing each other as much more human. And in some ways, we are using the virtual tools to connect on a much closer level than we have done previously. And again, those of you who are thinking about how can we take this back into our organizations post-lockdown, that human connection, authenticity that's been bred out of seeing each other's real lives, I think is something we should try and hold on to as leaders and take back into our organizations.
Absolutely. Just one thing that has emerged as a challenge to virtual meetings and webinars is Zoom fatigue. Or WebEx fatigue or Teams fatigue, whatever platform you happen to be using. Certainly at the beginning of lockdown, there was a sense that organizations needed to put as many structures in place to keep lines of communication open as they possibly could. And before you knew it, people were in more meetings than they had time for in their working week, just sort of sitting. And that leads to a sort of disengagement from overstimulus of these sort of virtual meetings. So if you feel that your organization has sort of dipped into that a little bit, we would recommend looking at those meetings, stepping back and saying, okay, so what does this feel like for an employee? What's the experience here? How many meetings are we asking people to go into? And are they actually able to do their work? And are these meetings useful?
So I was on a webinar yesterday with a client, just sorting out a new program we're introducing for them. And she was saying, I'm really, really tired. Sorry, I was up very late last night with our global team on a webinar about wellness and I'm exhausted today. And I just thought the juxtaposition of the fact they timed this webinar for Europe from an international organization to take care of their wellness and they were all having to stay up and lose sleep. Those are the sorts of things that Joe's thinking about. Actually think firmly around your employees and their experience, the way you would think about a customer's experience at the moment. But there is work being done that says the fact that we are having to communicate in 1D at the moment is making our brains work in different ways. We're used to picking up micro signals from how people move slightly on their face or their body language, things that we're not able to see when we're just seeing someone on a screen or maybe just a close-up of their face on the screen, which means our brains are having to work harder. And this is actually contributing to our sense of being weary and more tired at the end of the day than if we had been in a physical all-day meeting as well.
Yeah, and just a final point on the keeping connected tools. So when you think about virtual meetings and when you think about webinars in particular, there's a few pointers that we've kind of learned from doing them for a number of years. One is to keep them short. So we're going to be with you for no longer than an hour today because it's important that you don't overburden people with in terms of time. The second is to keep them active, so keep people engaged by holding polls and holding chats as we did, and also use other interesting things like video. And Mock is going to talk a little bit more about how you can keep people engaged both in virtual meetings, but also more broadly using digital tools.
Yes, because it's not just about connecting and broadcasting, it's also about keeping them engaged. And it's thinking about what sort of other materials and other mediums are out there that I can use to keep people engaged. Now, I've got there videos and podcasts, and you may, as we have at the Innovation Beehive, have the capability to create your own videos or to create your own podcast. If you can't, or if you don't have the time to do that at the moment, I would say think of these platforms as almost like a library that you can create. For your employees, can you create material that is out there and share knowledge and share best practice that you don't necessarily have to create yourself? We're working with a large aviation company at the moment, helping advise them on the well-being of their employees. Now, guess what? Aviation's had a massive financial hit and they've got no income coming in. So they don't have thousands and thousands of pounds to go off and create lots of videos and create podcasts. So we've asked them to create this, we've helped them to create this online library of fitness videos, of financial wellness videos, of podcasts about mindfulness, things that's out there available for free, that they're able to put together in a digital platform like a wiki or a portal, which their employees are then able to access. If you have a learning management system, you can use that to create videos and podcasts. If you don't have a learning management system, there are a lot of small business learning management systems out there that you can certainly trial for free in the short term or relatively inexpensive if you just Google them, and you'll be able then to present all of your information, all of your best practice as well on your own personal learning management system. So think about it, using these platforms to share knowledge, to engage and to train, as opposed to just broadcasting out. Don't feel that you have to create everything yourself. There's a whole plethora of information out there that you can present to your customers or to your employees as the curator, and therefore get a halo effect as being the expert in this area. Now, one thing we've been learning to do a lot more at the Innovation Beehive, because we run idea generation sessions, and a lot of our work is around collaboration. We've been using some online tools for collaboration, and Joe's going to talk you through or show you an example of one that we've been using called Miro, which replaces the traditional in-room brainstorm. We've got a question there from Norma before we move on, which is, what is a wiki? Wiki is a Wikipedia. It's almost like, if you imagine, my parents had the Encyclopedia Britannica in our house, and my father, from when I was in the crib, would read it to me at night because I was growing up to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. So I had to know all this Encyclopedia Britannica. It's almost like an online Encyclopedia Britannica, a Encyclopedia Britannica for your organization or for topics that are particularly important. So someone might be able to go onto your wiki or Wikipedia and just type in an issue or a topic and it'll bring it up for you.
It's a place where you can sort of store what's in the heads of people in your organization so that that doesn't get lost. But also, if you're no longer working in the office together, you know, you could go and easily have a conversation with someone and ask them and have a conversation and get that out of their head. But actually, it can be really helpful to have it in a virtual place so that people can go and find it for themselves. And
you can use things like OneDrive or Dropbox and create your own wiki if you have access to Outlook 365. Again, with OneDrive there, you can create your own filing system to just file all of the sorts of information that your employees would normally just get out of each other's heads.
Yeah. And at the most basic level, you could even just simply create an Excel spreadsheet with web links.
Yeah.
And you know, you'd have the title of the web link, you'd have a description of what it is, and then you'd have the link itself, and you could just share that with the people in your team. So you don't need to overburden yourself with technical complexity to achieve it.
So, as I said, we normally use different collaboration tools, usually use different sort of ways of getting information out of our clients through our insight gathering platforms. And over the last couple of weeks, we have been exploring new ways of doing this. Obviously, we're not able to sit in a room and put lots of post-it notes up on a wall and idea generate with people. We haven't been able to interview people face-to-face. So we've been using online surveys, using using SurveyMonkey. With clients who we're working with, we've been able to brand that in their own colors so that it looks seamless and fits into their organization's branding. But we've also looked at various tools and online collaboration platforms that replace the need for you to actually be in a room, but allows you to still keep working, allows you to still be productive. I'd like to share one that we find really helpful, which is called Miro.
So we're going to put it onto the screen so you'll be able to see it, I hope. Here we go. So this is Miro. Do you want to?
So Miro, imagine it's like a massive, and there's very different versions available. This is just the one that I particularly like. So imagine it's like a massive unending board of information that sits in the cloud. And what you're able to do in this is literally to map out all of the topics that you might want to talk to your team members about during a meeting, or you might want to have ideas around. And so Joe's put a couple of kind of examples here together. You maybe zoom in a little bit smaller. So say we're having a session here on, he's cut and pasted the roadmap through uncertainty. And then he's put together a couple of kind of key areas that you might want to brainstorm around: culture, technology, environment, roles, all focusing on the future of work. You're able to go on the left-hand side here and pick various post-it notes or lines, or insert images or icons to try and create and recreate that sense of you're having a brainstorming session in a meeting.
So let's demo that now. So and the other thing, the reason that we're sharing this with you is because it is an incredibly valuable resource for collaboration in particular. Now, we work in innovation, but you could use this whatever challenges you need to solve, because it is just so it's so convenient. You simply invite people to join your board, and then in real time, people can collaborate with you. So for example, if I really want to focus on roles, I'll say, I want to do this now. And there we have it. That will appear for everyone who's collaborating on this board at the same time. So we're not sharing the board with you all, but you can collaborate with me right now. So thinking about the future of work, thinking about the world of work in 10 years' time, what, just go with me on this, okay? So what do you imagine, and type them into the chat box, what do you imagine some new roles in the world of work to be in 10 years' time? We'll just put a couple on to demonstrate how easy this is to collaborate together with.
Can I put Chief Remote Working Officer?
Very much on brand.
Oh, we've got Collaboration Manager.
Yeah,
Love
Chief
that.
Remote Working. I'm going to put Chief RWO.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. AI Officer. Now the question there, Richard, is the AI Officer a person or is it an AI?
Oh my God, it's a bot. It's a bot.
And then we have, oh, what have I done? All right, there you go. And then we have Collaboration Manager. And we'll just, any more? Comms will become a much higher priority. Remote working evangelist.
Oh, I love that, remote working evangelist. When I first started working with Google about 10 years ago, they actually had a role called the Google Evangelist. And I remember being taken around Mountain View by a Google Evangelist and thinking, you've got the coolest job title in the world. Flower sharer.
Director of Fun and Wellbeing. Flower sharer.
Love that.
Brilliant. So you can see how easy that is. And then we can, you could be collaborating with people and we could say, right, okay, so now we need to vote on which one we think is going to be most likely. So everyone, you've got 2 post-it notes. Stick your post-it note on the one that you think is most likely and give it a score out of 10. So 9, and someone else puts 5, and then someone else comes along and says, actually, I think remote working evangelist, but I'm not that sure, so I'm going to give it 4. So you see, you can get really creative with it. And as Mark said, he has used this with where you're using.
I'm running it this afternoon actually for a large hospitality business where we're developing their new employment brand. We've got videos in it. We've got insights that we got through our surveys and our telephone calls. And I'm taking a whole working party of 14 people through it. The great thing about Miro is you can create 2 boards for free. So if you want to go on and have a play around and try it with a friendly client or some of your team, you can do a couple of boards for free, which is great. I think you're allowed to have up to 3 people operate or on your boards as well. So if you've got a small team, you can bring them together for that as well. And then there are various versions, paid versions, if you want to, for example, issue day passes, if you want to do it with a broader team. I think it's like $3 a day. Maybe if you're going to have 10 or 15 clients come in, $3 a day, they'll be able to join and then actually appear and put their own post-it notes on rather than telling Jake what his post-it notes are.
And you can see that what I've done here is I've zoomed in, so you can then start having detailed conversations about particular aspects, and it's an incredibly valuable tool. There's lots of collaboration platforms out there. We just thought, it would be useful to show you one that we use and that we use and have experience of using. So.
I have to be honest, when I first learned about this, when it first came up, I was concerned. I love embracing new things. I mean, I work in innovation, so hopefully I would want to do that. But I was a little bit concerned about the technology and the platform. And I was thinking, you know, I'm not really sure if this is going to work for me. It sounds very complicated. I'd be quite nervous around doing this in front of clients. I tell you, there's videos online. There's a really helpful section. I just played around. I got you to play around with it with me. I asked another one of my colleagues, Zach, to have a play around with me. I've become so comfortable and so confident. And also, just to say, when I shared it with a client last week, they were completely blown away by it. They thought it was the most amazing technology. And it gave us quite a strong kudos with them in terms of, well, you really can do this project remotely. You're not just relying on some PowerPoints and a Word document.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just going to check the chat. What do you think of Trello? Yeah, Trello's great. I would say Trello's really good for project management collaboration. For anyone who doesn't know, Trello uses what's known as Kanbans. So you have little cards with tasks on, and you can move them through a project cycle. So it's really useful for project management. What we shared with you there is perhaps more useful for the front end of that process, which is when you sort of get creative, or when you're trying to work together on something that's maybe slightly more nebulous to help you focus in.
And you can do things, Andrea said it's nice, it's a real-time mind mapping tool. It is. Yeah. And also there are templates on there for things like customer journey. They've got various a business model canvas board on there. So they've got a number of templates that you can use.
Well, Peter has 100 live projects on at the moment. So yeah, maybe look into Trello if you're not using it already. Yeah. One thing I would say, depending on the size of your team, rolling out a new tool such as Trello, is you should think of it as digital transformation. If you're going to move your project management onto a digital means, you need to think about not just equipping people with the skills to use the tool and implementing the tool itself. You also need to think about the behaviors that go alongside the tool and how people are going to use it. And, you know, with any change that is implemented in an organization, there's going to be pushback, and be prepared to manage that accordingly. So as well as looking into Trello, I'd get yourself a Change Management for Dummies book, unless you're already an expert at that, of course. So I'd love to hear from you. Which new tools, particularly thinking about new tools, so which tools have you been experimenting with whilst in lockdown? Anything that we've shared, anything else that we haven't talked about? Just type into the comments box and we'll talk a little about those. And also if you've got any tips on how to use these tools effectively that maybe we haven't covered already.
Someone was saying to me yesterday that they've started to use Slack a bit more.
Oh yeah,
because they're able to then Slack. It's like a project management tool, but also they're able to communicate with each other in messaging as well.
I see Emma has just written Microsoft Teams. Yeah, it's interesting. We've started using Microsoft Teams as well. It's been on my laptop as an app for about 2 years, and I've just ignored it. And suddenly I find that it's a really, really valuable tool, and it's just been there. So a lot of us, if you have an account with Microsoft, there's a very good chance that you also have access to Microsoft Teams. Highly recommend using it. Zach says he's been using a mind mapping app to organize his thoughts. And also, I know that Zach has also been using the mind mapping app to share his thoughts. And it's extremely effective for doing that as well if you structure it in the right way. But I would be careful with mind mapping tools that you use yourself. Don't let design and structure become the dominant focus of what you're trying to do, because actually mind mapping is supposed to enable you to be free. So just hold in balance what you're trying to do, hold that intention. Jitsi and a shared whiteboard. Now, I've not heard of Jitsi, so Norma, if you could tell us what Jitsi is, that would be great. Canva is brilliant, isn't it, Richard? I use Canva every day when I do Instagram posts. And Peter said Teams combined with Dropbox, right? Yeah. And you know, actually, creating an ecosystem of tools is one of the reasons we shared the slides that we did, is because it's important to think about how the tools, if they don't speak to each other directly, what structures and what protocols do you need to put in place in the organization to make sure that people understand how the tools work together. We talk about sort of hacking the tools, but it's a bit weird to talk about hacking in the digital context.
Dangerous.
But, yeah, talking about hacking the tools and thinking, how can I make this work for me? But if you do that, if you use a tool for something that it wasn't initially or necessarily designed for, it's really important to let all of your people and all of your stakeholders know how you're using it and how they should use it effectively. And Andrea said that she's added additional apps to Microsoft Teams, but our head office has limited them. There's always, yeah, I mean, when you work in a larger organization, there's going to be certain limitations to what you can achieve. But again, Microsoft Teams and the whole Office 365 suite is incredibly powerful because you can create flows and you don't need to worry about things like APIs. But you still need to make sure people know how to do and how to use them effectively so that they don't mess things up by misusing them. Because the more complex you make the back-end system, I think the simpler the processes should be, but then there's always a risk that things go wrong. Slack and Google Hangouts, absolutely great. Tools for Zoom, WhatsApp for comms, Trello to manage my own work but not others. Right, Trello to manage my own work and not others. That's interesting because we use a project management and task app at the Innovation Beehive, and we're able to give each other tasks, and there's real value in that because it means that when we set up a new project, we can assign all the tasks up front and everyone's clear on what they're doing.
Again, though, there's quite a lot of behaviours you have to and contract with people to say it's okay for me to give you a task when you're not there because you suddenly get a notification, oh, I've been given a task. I know certainly initially when we started using the project management tool, some people felt their work was being looked over, that they were being really managed on a micro management process, which wasn't the intention. And also some people felt uncomfortable with people allocating them tasks, and particularly more junior people in the business allocating them tasks. So as well as actually learning the technical side of using the app, we had to confront some difficult cultural aspects as well.
And I can see Angela, I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm assuming that you're booking an appointment, and Angela has said that she uses Calendly for use with Zoom to set up appointments to avoid toing and froing. I'm going to make an assumption that you're talking about appointments with, customers. And someone was talking earlier about thinking about the customer journey, and that's a really great example of using technology to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and how frustrating it is to go back and forth. But also there's an advantage to you as a business because you get your appointment more easily. So it's a really good example of using technology brilliantly. And I just saw as well that Meryl said that her daughter is being taught ballet on Zoom with band backup to demonstrate techniques and showcase a whole dance. And Mark, in the white paper, you're writing about how the different industries have kind of approached things in new ways, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mean even garden centres doing order on Facebook and collect. You've got local pubs running takeaway menus, and you've got churches even going online. So lots of different organisations and different industries have responded as accordingly as they can. There was a point here Heather Osborne made about, for me, it's about culture and behaviours as well. As we've never used a project management tool online, it would need discussion within the team. Absolutely, these tools are there to enable you and your teams to be productive and to work together better. They're not there to make people feel bad about the work they're doing, particularly at the moment when we're all having lots of pressures of working from home, the pressure to feel always on. Zach mentioned the idea of the blurring between work and home in his post earlier on there. So making sure these tools, if you do introduce them, you're thinking of the behavioural aspects of them as well. Because it's about setting us up for success, really, and setting us up for success, firstly in the stabilise and sustain, but now thinking about how do we take these tools and set ourselves up for success when we start to return back to work. There'll be a whole mixture of both practical and cultural things that we will need to do as leaders to prepare for the return back to work, and then actually to return back for work. And there'll be some more details coming out from the Innovation Beehive around how to do that. But just some top line thoughts now. You will have absolutely some pre-practical planning to do. Thinking about where, for example, where I might use a hot desk, where I might not use a hot desk. If I have direct reports to employees, what's the density of my office? How do I repurpose my dining areas? What do we do on entrances to buildings for visitors and for staff entrances? How do I manage when some of my team, because of perhaps the schools aren't going to be open, different cohorts of children going about different times. Some people might be working from home and some people might be fully immersed back in the office. So practical planning about who might be doing what, where, when, and how. Making sure that you use the tools that are available and are useful to you. What you don't want to do is radically transform yourself digitally and have a whole lot of tools that are half used, or some people don't use and some people do use. Decide on the 3 or 4 tools that are really right for your business, for your customers and that will enable your people to do their job more effectively and more productively. Review what's worked really well for you during the lockdown. See what the challenges were, see if it was a cultural thing or a technical thing, and then land on what tools are most effectively going to help you as you potentially move back into work with cohorts of people working at different times. Because of pressures of home life, because of pressures of making sure that teams are split so we don't get infections across teams, lots of our clients are saying, I will have different cohorts. I might have some people that work Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the office, some people that work Tuesday and Thursday in the office. We've got people who are talking about bringing people who are starting at 9, people starting at 1, people starting at 4. So we have people working right across the pattern. We've got clients talking about having people working or giving them the option to work 6 days a week rather than 5. Some people working part-time. So lots of different cohorts to manage there. And it's important to think about how can I encourage and enable inclusivity during this period. One of my concerns has been that actually, as we've used more technology over the last couple of weeks, we've used it in a broadcast capacity. We've sent out messages. But I was pleased to see people talking about things like whiteboards, etc., where you can bring people together and you can collaborate and make sure that people feel included in the conversation. They're not just listening to a conversation that someone else has had. And it's really important as well in terms of thinking about how extroverts and how introverts, people who are more naturally shy, can still feel included and don't disappear on the edges of this new technical working. Because building that sense of community when you've got necessarily not somewhere for everyone to commune is what you'll need to put in your practical planning. Think through your employee touch points. Think about how you will hold your first one-to-one, how you'll hold your first team meeting when maybe only 30% of your team will physically be with you, 20% of your team might still be furloughed, and the rest of your team might be online in their kitchen with their dog barking in the background. What do you want them to experience? What's the experience going to be like for them? And what do you want to get out of it? What is your first one-to-one going to be like? The first time that someone comes back to work when they've been furloughed for 3 months and they have to suddenly change gear and they attend a meeting with you at 9:10 and you say, right, you're working on this project, do a project plan. And they spent the last 12 weeks baking cookies and watching Netflix. So how do you get them and enable them to step up that gear? So lots of things to consider in terms of the employee touch points. And as small business owners or leaders in your businesses, you won't get this right 100% at the beginning. You will fail fast and in public, and that's okay. Here's a lovely little example of President Obama making a little fail at a state dinner with the Queen.
This realm, this England, to the Queen.
So in that instant there, President Obama was giving his speech and then toasted the Queen, but protocol would be that the Queen, as the host, raises the toast. Did you notice how the Queen just said how kind, showed real leadership there and made sure that he didn't feel bad about failing fast in public? He certainly would learn that for the next time he comes for supper with the Queen. However, I think we're all going to experience that. We're all going to be slightly wrong-footed. We're all going to make mistakes. And don't put the additional pressure on yourself that you have to get things 100% right the first time. I think we've bought each other a bit more humanity over the last couple of months, and we're much more willing to understand that we're all learning new skills and trying to do things differently.
I think the other thing to think about in relation to the sort of failing fast in public is when it comes to building a sense of community and encouraging and enabling inclusivity. One of the ways you build community in a virtual context is by agreeing the ways of working and the norms that you adopt. And if those aren't clear to people, then it's very possible, or even if they are clear to people, but people don't always do them every time. So it's possible that people are going to kind of misfire and, you know, make faux pas or do things that make them feel embarrassed when actually, but everyone else is fine with it. So I think it's also important to think, how do we, one, set the rules of engagement, if you like, for our teams when we come together? And two, how do we make people feel comfortable if, for whatever reason, because they've got their life going on around them, they're not able to do the things that we've agreed?
So one of the things we've been working with an executive team at the moment from their people leadership perspective is helping them contract how they have worked together over the last couple of months. And actually this Thursday, I'm running a session with the extended leadership team around how they will work together, how they'll contract to work together over the months as they start to move into return and then onwards into renew within the business, because we'll need to behave differently and we'll also need new skills. And now each organization is going to need different skills, and it's impossible really to say exactly what skills you'll need in your organization. But having looked around at what our clients are telling us and what we're seeing out there in the economy, it is clear that any organization that has been successful historically and has been able to keep the wheels on during this period of time is one that has put the customer at the heart of its business. And that won't change when we move into the next normal of return and then renew. So you still have to put your customer, what the needs, expectations, and changed expectations and change needs potentially of your customer are in the next normal phase of return. But there's probably three big territories where we believe that skills will be required as we move forward. The first is what we call the innovation phase. This is about something we've all experienced during the lockdown, having to adapt, having to come up with new solutions to problems that we never knew we'd have previously, and really be more agile and take those skills from the innovator's toolkit to come up with new solutions to new problems we're experiencing every day. That fact that we've increased our capability in the world of digital, that we're far more accepting of the value that digital brings. I think it's important that if we're able to bring that, we've talked about that in the webinar, bring that knowledge, that acceptance, that value creation back into the business. The second bit is what we call execution. So if we are going to have lots of people working from home, how do you motivate them? How do you help them to balance their work life and their home life? How do you give people direction and performance manage people? Because goals have to be achieved when we're back to business in the next normal. How do you keep people's motivations high and ensure that they are having impact? And there's a piece there about connecting people back in with a sense of meaning and revisiting the purpose of the organization. And then thirdly, real heavy focus on interpersonal skills. So trying to understand what your customer needs now and what your employees need now, what their expectations are. You'll need to have really strong empathy skills to put yourself in the shoes of your customer and your employees or any associates that you work with. High levels of emotional intelligence, because an email, a one-dimensional conversation, understanding things can be slightly taken out of context, really understanding the dynamics of how people understand each other and how you can best communicate with each other. And then, as always, relationship building, but relationship building in what we call the distance economy. If you've been used to going out and seeing clients or running your training sessions or meeting your end users face-to-face in a sales capacity or a digital or in a delivery capacity, how do you do that in the digital world? How do you maintain those deep connections when you're not actually face-to-face and that's the way that you normally have interacted with your end user or your client group?
Brilliant. So we've talked about what are some of the challenges of virtual working and delivering virtually with clients and with each other in the organization. We've looked at some of the tools of virtual working, and we've also talked a little bit about how we can set up for success as we move into the next normal. And Mark, I think, it's really interesting, the phrase next normal that you've got on the slide there. We're not talking about the new normal as though we're kind of moving into a new world and that world is going to be fixed and permanent. I think it's very clear from, even from the Prime Minister's speech on Sunday, that actually we don't know how the world is going to look in a month's time, let alone in a year's time. So we need to be prepared for this constant sense of uncertainty and constantly changing. And another reason, that brings me back again to this reason I'm so pleased that everyone is keen to learn from the last 7 weeks in terms of their digital capability, because even if we come out of lockdown, there's a possibility we may have to go back into lockdown at some point. I think that's been very clear in the messaging we've been getting from government. So actually, we don't want to lose that skill set too quickly. And Mark talking about the next normal and what we need to do in terms of innovation, execution, and interpersonal skills as leaders, and also building that capability for our people. I hope you can see that the tools and the behaviors and the mindset of virtual working can actually enable you to improve motivation through sharing, for example, the videos and podcasts and articles. It can help you to improve impact by using the tools such as Trello and Miro. It'll enable adaptability and obviously digital capability. Miro is a great example of a tool that you can use for innovation if you use it in the right way. And then the interpersonal piece, which in some ways is probably the biggest change and the biggest challenge for us. Thinking about how you build empathy in a two-dimensional screen, how you can use your emotional intelligence to enable others to join in and be collaborative with you, and how you can build those relationships. They are the challenges that we're going to be facing, and the tools are there. It's a case of using them in the most effective way. So I really hope that you have found this webinar helpful for beginning to explore that. As a next step, we are going to be sending you some resources. So there's a little white paper that we've created that goes into some detail on the tools. So I'll be sending you that as a PDF, so you won't need to type in any emails or details. It'll come into your mailbox as a PDF. We'll also send you the PDF of the roadmap that Mark was talking about. I think that'll be a useful resource for you to have.
And on there, it has a breakdown of the questions that you will need to answer and some of the skills that you'll need to demonstrate. At each stage, there'll be different questions and different skills and behaviours at each stage of the roadmap through uncertainty.
And if you want to deep dive into that roadmap through uncertainty, we're actually running a webinar, again, in collaboration with the Marches Growth Hub at 11 a.m. next Tuesday. So Mark and I will be joining you again for that. And we'll be delving into that in more depth. And if you see creativity as your way through the crisis, which I'm sure you can see that we do, then join us on the 2nd of June for a creative problem solving webinar when we'll talk about how you gather insights, how you use creativity tools and behaviors to solve problems, and how you prepare to take your ideas and take them into action. So look, thank you all so much. Look out for an email from me, and I think Emma and Anna from the Marches Growth Hub will also be in touch with you to follow up. Oh, and we also, on the slide here, we have a WhatsApp group, which is all about virtual delivery, where we share best practice and hints and tips on, and we all share, not just us, but it's a group, so you can share your hints and tips as well. And all you need to do is take your smartphone, put the camera on and scan that QR code, and you'll be invited to join the WhatsApp group if you so desire. So thank you, everybody. I just need to...
Thank you for all your comments, by the way. It's been really great that everyone's leaned in, and we've had lots of examples that people have shared as a sense of community. It's really, as facilitators, it's really great to hear and been really helpful and fantastic that the Marches were able to put this on for us.
Yeah, and Anna has just shared a link to a forthcoming webinar, a forthcoming event they have on Thursday. So that's in the chat box. If you're interested in HR and HS, do join them for that, and also look out for the email from us later today. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a brilliant rest of the week. So take care.
Be strong, stay safe. Bye-bye.